The owl died.
All right. Do we need to do anything else, or is that?
I think you're good.
All right. So welcome to Python Project Power Up. Named by Joe. He's very good at naming things.
I use ChatGPT.
To get a name?
Yeah. I was like, what's a name? Sorry, go ahead.
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT.
Oh,
So
yeah,
now
is that
I'm
like
curious
GIF or
about the
GIF?
prompts. What prompt did you give it?
I could look. I'll pull it up.
Okay. Yeah, so mostly going to talk about just how to structure Python projects, how to build, how to package, some best practices. I was hoping to keep it a little bit interactive, understand what other people are doing as well, because of course this is Python packaging, so there are no right or wrong answers, and the world of Python packaging, if you've been keeping up with it, is a bit of a mess, and hopefully we will review some things and try to keep your repos and packages a little bit less of a mess. So that said, I want to start with a couple of considerations. So I was trying to think of again, there's many different ways to package, organize, structure, all these things. So I was looking at a couple considerations that might dictate why you might do something one way versus another. Starting off with what does your code actually do, right? So you can do a lot with Python. You can have just one-off scripts that do a little thing. You just want to run one little thing. You can have a full-blown app or project, like if you're using a Flask or a Django or something like that, might have a very different structure and layout than if you just have a script to do a thing. And also, if non-Python files are involved, it might also dictate how you want to organize stuff, not only in your repo, and then how you reference those, and whatever build tools you might be using to keep all that together. If you do have a web app or something, and you have HTML files, or if you have data files or files of YAML, storing certain things and whatnot. Along with that, just another consideration can be, well, who's going to use your code? If it's just you and you do your own things with your code, maybe it's less important of how it's structured and organized and whatnot. If you are in an organization, that might dictate how you share and disseminate. Does something need to be installable? Can you just do a git clone? Or have someone else do a git clone, pull down a thing, run the script and whatnot, or you're sharing with the world. And really, that comes down to how is it distributed. Do you want it to be pip installable, meaning it is a real package and it's in your site packages and you can do imports, or if it's something that's just loose, and of course, what is the build process for that? Again, a lot of build options in the Python world today, and if you're using Conda versus setup tools versus Flit or whatever, that might dictate some of those things as well. And of course, any kind of organizational standards. So naming patterns, versioning processes, any specific paradigms or whatnot. Does everything live under a source directory, an app directory, or just raw in the in the root of your repo? So these are all things that, even if you want to do a different best practice, maybe your organization might dictate how that needs to go. So as we said, there's a lot of different things in the Python world today. If you are at all aware of some of the history of Python, it's actually a really old language. It's been around for, God, how long?
Late 80s, early 90s?
Well, not that long. I mean, I want to say at least 15 years, right?
Oh, I think it's longer than that.
Yeah, probably longer.
I want to say late 90s. Late 90s?
Late 90s? Yeah, that probably sounds about right. Anyway, the point is kind of Python has been around longer than certain concepts of packaging and distribution have been around. So sometimes you get comparisons between Python and other languages. Say, hey, Node is so good, or Rust is doing it right. Well, of course they are, because there are newer languages that have not had these things. So that said, I have a couple different categories here of things that have changed over time, especially if you are familiar with dist utils and then setup utils and then all these third-party things. They're all a little bit different, and things like configuration and metadata have literally lived in all of these things. And I've worked in projects where I've had it in a setup.py, I've had it in an init, in a setup config, I've had it in a toml, all these things. Hello.
Have a seat.
Okay. So same thing with the build process. So I've been doing like Python setup, bdist or sdist forever. Well, the longest time, and kind of like the newer way is to use like, if you're using static tools, for example, it's like, a Python build command. Did you want to jump in with I think you looked up the history there.
February 20th, 1991 was.
1991. Whoa, okay,
I thought
that
it
was
was
way
a
off.
long time ago. My deep history is the guy who wrote it was watching Monty Python.
Yep.
When he was developing the language, and he's a European guy, I think.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Is he like Swedish or?
I don't know, because he's been in the U.S. I mean, fun fact, if you weren't aware, at one
Gildo
point,
von Rossum.
Guido van Rossum, yeah. At one point, he was actually working for Google, which is kind of interesting because at one
Dutch.
point in time, the creator of Python and the creator of Java were both Google employees.
Interesting. Now he's a Microsoft employee.
Oh, is he?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Him and Anthony Shaw and another guy who's kind of famous in the Python community, they all are working at Microsoft to improve the speed of Python. It's like a dynamic crack team of all the Python experts or whatever.
Okay, so future meetup topic, if you guys have been keeping track, have you heard of the Mojo?
Yeah, someone just asked me about that. They're like, have you heard of this?
Yeah, what is that?
Well, we've got like a little Python clan at this pod over here, so people just ask us questions, and they're like, have you heard of this Python thing? And it's like,
It's a new language. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
new language that's kind of like an extension of Python, but with like a different interpreter and whatnot. It's supposed to run 1,000 times faster or something.
71,000.
71,000. Okay.
is it for like AI stuff? Is that kind of what it's geared towards, or just?
For probably anything.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I have to look into that.
Yeah, so we'll see if we evolve into the Mojo group
Okay.
in the future.
Have you seen it? Is the syntax pretty similar?
Isn't it like the same? I think it's
It's the same syntax plus some additional things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, so it won't be really learning anything new then.
I mean, just the new stuff on top of it. Yeah.
I think they're gonna call it Python Sharp.
Yes. I love that.
Okay. Yeah, so look forward to that. All right, so let's continuing on. So in addition, the way that you install Python is also evolved. So I don't know if anyone remembers easy install, but you can do Python setup install, Python M easy install, pip install, and of course if you're using other things other package managers like Conda and whatnot, there's other install things as well. And of course, the tools used to do your builds and packaging have also evolved. So distro tools, I think, is officially dead, although some of the concepts of it still live on, especially in setup tools. And of course, there's all kinds of different things now. Third-party tools, and I'm sure there'll be even more war on what the right ways to do. So I found this one, I guess blog, from this one person that's pretty up to date, but it had a very I want to go up to the top because I think it had the perfect title to kind of give a presentation of the state of the Python world today. It's how to improve Python packaging or why 14 tools are at least 12 too many. So it's a great read if you want to get into there. He does kind of talk about comparisons to other languages and what Python does not great and what the package authority is doing not great. And I think he's kind of I get that he's a fan of PDM, but there's all kinds of good information in here, including a nice little table of a lot of modern tools, and of course all these different ways to probably do very similar things. So I'll have that link in the slides in case anyone wants to go and check it out. It's definitely an interesting read.
Seems like the PI organization has been pretty active the last few months in terms of trying to figure out some of these problems of we have 14 tools.
Yes, and that's actually PyPA.
Or PyPA.
Right, and actually in that article he does kind of dump on them saying they're not doing enough, they're not doing it fast enough, blah blah blah. And that's why some of the third-party ones, the unofficial or non PyPA endorsed ones are I guess favored by that particular author. Can I skip one? No. So just continuing on for the topics tonight, I did want to make a couple of assumptions just because we could probably spend who knows how long going through all these different tools we want to evaluate and whatnot. So I'm going to make a couple of assumptions of what we want to talk about, and that's saying a package is going to be a pip installable thing. So we can install it from like PyPy or equivalent, like an internal PyPy, like GitHub, local LAN computer, whatnot. For versioning standards, going to go with like semantic versioning as available from Git tags. So it's another topic of conversation. Like if your organization has like nightly builds, daily builds, golden builds, and whatnot, you might have very different versioning standards. But I'll give some examples of how to keep versioning based off of Git tags, because I find that to be like very useful things. Moving on with some of the config files and metadata, at this point it seems like TOML files are, I don't say winning, but are becoming more and more like in favor versus having stuff instead of that py, instead of config or any other types of configuration and metadata type files. And so the intent is to not use those and to not have requirements.txt. And again, not that any of these are necessarily wrong. They can. I've seen all kinds of different combinations of using one way or like all the ways together, like keeping project stuff in pyproject.toml and keeping like other configuration for tools and whatnot instead of config and that kind of thing. And of course, along the lines with that way of thinking, I want to have like no additional files, like INI files for other things. So if you've used a lot of like Python tools before, PyTest, PyLint, like all these things, a lot of them have like a whole bunch of arguments you can give, and they also support like a local, or not a local, but a configuration file. Many of them in INI format for that. So if you think about a repo, you can very easily have like a PyTest INI, a PyLint INI, and all these things, and you just have like a whole bunch of crap really in your repo. So using project.toml or something equivalent, basically you can put configurations for all of these different tools in addition to your package metadata in one file. In my opinion, that helps keep your repo really, really clean. And finally, you can use setup tools to build. I know there's plenty of other things that could look at, again, with all these different tools. Definitely you can look at PyPA for that. So I'm going to jump to their page real quick. Oh, did I put the wrong link on there? Actually, I meant to go here for the packaging authority. And of course, they have a list of a million things you can have on here as well, including PyPA supported projects. And somewhere down here, there's like Flit, Hatch, packaging, pip, and all these different things you could be using. And of course, they have some of the like non-PyPA projects like Conda, DevPy, all these different ones as well. PDM, which is one that I hear people are liking. Again, lots of different ways to do things. So I'm going to stick with the basic ones for the scope of this talk. So that said, let's talk a little bit about. Yeah, keep on skipping one. I guess let me pull the room real quick. Who's either familiar with and/or using TOML? Anyone?
I've got a few files in like one of my projects. It's I think they're setup files for Streamlit, which is like a
nice.
front-end rendering dealio. For
I did
Python.
my first Streamlit literally yesterday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just started developing in it just a few weeks ago, and I absolutely love it. It's so easy.
Nice. Okay, future talk.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Right on.
June?
Yeah.
You want to talk?
Sure. I'll talk all about it. Yeah. That's great.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that'd be a great topic.
We have a pyproject.toml in ours, but we still have some of the other ones too. It's not like all consolidated into the PyProject. And quick aside, your slide where it was like comparing like all the different columns of the tools, I'm like, it is so overwhelming trying to like, you Google how to do something and like, you almost have to Google like the last 6 months, because if you look at something from like a year ago, it's like, oh, there's a new way to do it now.
Yeah.
It's like devolving into the JavaScript ecosystem or something.
No, we can't go there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, no right or wrongs. It'll be interesting to see, what ends up being most favorable, and we can probably have this talk again next year and have completely different information, and we'll see if PyPA gets their act together and gives us more things. So anyway, TOML is yet another configuration file. This is coming from, I stole some information directly from like the toml.io page if you want to look at that, where they talk about it. So a couple just, I guess, big takeaways for that is, that it's designed to be, I guess, one configuration file to rule them all. It supports like a different variety of like native types, arrays, booleans, strings, all that good stuff. And it's not a Python thing, but it's actually supported by most major languages today. So if you're the type of person who does things in various languages, it might be a good option because you don't have to like learn too many different things. It's all going to be the same type of format, even though tools, configurations for specific tools inside TOML, it can vary, but if you're familiar with TOML and you're doing Rust or Java or something else, then it might be a good thing to know.
Is it kind of like YAML?
No, it's
No.
more like INI type format. So we'll take a look at some in just a bit.
I think at a passing glance, you could almost mistake it for YAML. They look vaguely similar, don't they?
Well, I mean,
It's got colons
Yeah.
and brackets.
That's colons and brackets.
I think.
But it also has like the INI style, bracket like key header things, and yeah, it's not like hierarchical like YAML is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, we'll show an example in just a bit, so hopefully that'll help. So a couple of things just about like TOML and Python packages. Again, just a little bit of history with the PEPs that have come up over the last couple of years, where the point is to separate the configuration from the build system itself. In case you wanted to, hey, I'm using like setup tools today, but I want to use PDM tomorrow. They both support TOML, and it's basically just a configuration change in there, so you don't have to have a setup.py equivalent for wherever the next tool is, kind of thing. So TOML supports all of that. Of course, you can use the config inside there for all your other tools, and using this as of, I don't remember what exact version of Python, but you actually do not need to have a setup.py to do a build, which is pretty cool.
Does that mean that, well, what superseded setup.py? Was it was the TOML file?
I want to say it's like the build package itself, because something still has to read that file.
So, but you would put all the stuff that would go in setup.py inside your TOML?
Yeah, so just like if you use setup.py and you've used like setup or setup.cfg, and you know that you can have everything in setup.cfg actually in your setup.py, and CFG basically came up because setup.py is an executable, and anytime you actually run your package, you might not want to do executing type things in there, so there is a separation. But yeah, I think it'll make sense a little bit later. So we can actually do some build commands and see how that works.
Okay.
If you're interested. So a couple things just to know. Of course, most setup tools, setup tools, including setup tools. Yeah, I realize that talking about build tools and setup tools can be a little confusing. Are supported by or support TOML these days, but they're not all necessarily the same. And some third-party tools do not support TOML. Something like Flake 8 does not really work well with that yet. It's really up to the tool itself if it wants to support the TOML configuration. And some functionality is still in beta. Like I was hoping to also nuke the manifest file. So if you use setup before, you can have set the paths and excludes and includes type things. Tried to do that with only TOML, and it's not working quite the way I want. So using it with a manifest still works, and I'll show you an example of a project that I've been working on that uses all this. So getting into TOML, this is basically what it looks like. So it's not 2 columns. I just needed to fit it all in here. But the takeaway basically is you can configure I can't highlight now. You can set the build system. Like in this case, I'm using setup tool. So again, if you wanted to use Flit or something else later, you could basically just change what you're doing here. And of course, the product or project information here is all the stuff that used to live either in your setup.py or in your setup.cfg. So all this package metadata now can live here.
Can you specify in your dependencies versions?
Yes. Yeah. If you want to request 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, you can. Cool. And here's an example of how the TOML looks for other things, like I guess I would call these your kind of code call-worthy tools. So your PyTest, your PyLint, all these types of things. These are some of the ones that I use pretty regularly. PyTest, code coverage, ModPy for static typing, Bandit for security checking, and PyLint. So lots of the configuration to do most of the things you want to do are all here, but of course the keys and values are specific to the tool itself. So like most tools would have like an exclude. So if I look at Bandit here, this has exclude underscore ders. Great. If I look at MyPy, it has exclude, just exclude. If I look at coverage, like for PyTest code coverage, it has omit. So they all do the same things. It just kind of sucks that there's not a common language for all of this yet. So it's very easy to like as you're like configuring something, it's like, oh yeah, I need to omit some stuff. Oh, it's not the right key for that. This one has to be exclude underscore ders, and this one uses underscores. This one uses dashes. So it's not all perfectly clean yet, and unfortunately that's always going to be dependent on the tool itself, and I don't know if there's any plans to try to get those more uniform. So just know if you want to put all your configuration inside your TOML, just going to be some variation between like the tools that you might use.
And that way it feels like JSON to me, where it's just the key value pairs and the syntax that you're following.
Yeah, so it's not all, I mean, yeah, it's kind of key value pairs. What you can see here is like this one is like a Boolean, this one's like technically an array. Some of these are just strings, some of them are numbers. So yeah, key value pairs, but not quite the same type of structure, or I guess in my mind, as clear of a structure as JSON.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
All right. So that said, I'm going to talk a little bit about repository structure. So this is another one of those things where there's not necessarily a right or wrong, and probably everyone has their own opinion of stuff. So I think if I just break it down to a couple key areas, this will hopefully look familiar to maybe some things you guys are working on. So you typically have like your boilerplate stuff. This is going to be all your not Python specific stuff, but any kind of like repo you have is going to have your license, your README, and like all your Git stuff. You probably want to have like a docs folder for any kind of documentation. I have an example using Sphinx, and of course Sphinx can have its own configuration, its own like source files, its own requirements, etc. Yeah.
What is Sphinx?
Oh, Sphinx is basically a Python package used to render documentation files. So I can show you an example of that. If you ever read like Read the Docs, for example,
I met the co-owner.
nice, yeah. So they're very supportive of Sphinx.
That's unfortunately the first time I heard of it, but
okay.
he's on Wiki.
Okay.
So that's kind of cool.
On
I've never
Wiki?
actually met anyone that's in Wiki before.
Oh, like Wikipedia.
Yeah, I looked him up. He's in there. But, okay, I'm sorry. So
Yeah, no. I mean, this is just like one example, of course, and you can use whatever you want for your docs. I think the point is just to have those separated into their own folder. But Sphinx specifically is like one of these things that renders from, it used to be like RTS. I think it supports RTS and Markdown now, and can like render to HTML and those types of things.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, source is what I think most people prefer for their source. All your source files live in there. There is different schools of thoughts of like, should everything be directly under source and then like a package name, or should it be what they call flat, where you have one fewer level? Again, not a right or wrong. This is just an example of how that can go. I'm a fan of like having a source directory and then the actual packaged stuff namespaced under it, in case for whatever reason you wanted to have like multiple packages or whatnot under a source directory. And of course tests. So tests can mean very different or several different things. Unit tests, functional tests, integration, regression, whatnot, and also any kind of like test config, fixtures, reusable data, factories, all that kind of stuff. I think works well for living under a test directory.
That structure in your sumtest.py file.
In my what test?
Sorry, your test.py file
Yeah.
or sumtest.py. Would it be able to see my package, like that that package and the modules in it, without manipulating the Python path?
Depends what your test runner is.
Oh, like PyTest. Will PyTest just figure it out?
So PyTest is very good at finding tests wherever they live.
Mm.
If you're using like nodes or just unit test, I don't remember offhand. I've been using basically PyTest for, I want to say the last, at least the last 2 or 3 professional jobs I've had, so I pretty much do everything with PyTest.
Gotcha. So PyTest would be able to handle that.
Yeah. Gotcha. Great. So let's say that we have all the stuff that we like. We have our configuration files. We have our data structure, our repository structure all set up. The next thing that you can do if you want to keep things nice and consistent and always the way you like it is using repo templates. So anyone actually use templates?
Is this like cookie cutter?
It's not like cookie. Yeah, cookie cutter is usually more of like, you run a script or whatever and it builds everything for you.
Right. It's like, what do you want to name this thing? And then it kind of like
Yeah.
regex fills it in or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So a repo template is more like a starting point, I guess you can say. So yeah, I guess I'll put a definition here. Might as well read it. It's like a pre-made structure for creating your repos in a specific format.
I did not know you could do that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I've seen it before, but I didn't realize that was like built into GitHub. Interesting.
Yes, you can definitely do it with GitHub. It's you can also do it just like non-GitHub. It's like built into Git, but to use a template, you have to have like the template on your system to like like a Git init like via template. So I don't have an example of a Git command to do that from GitHub, but if you use like the GitHub CLI, then you can do something exactly like this. And we can do exactly, and we can actually run this command if you want to see how that works to create a new repo with a given template, and I have one that we can have an example. Of course, if you are using GitHub, you can either go to the template and click this button to use this template to create a new repo, or if you have access to the template when you create a new repo, you might have seen this button before, where you can create the repository based on the template. And
You do that with GitLab or just Git itself, or is it specific to GitHub?
Probably, because templating is built into Git. I just haven't used GitLab in a long time, so I can't say.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, if you have an account, go on there. I bet they have something exactly equivalent to this because GitLab is basically has.
My experiences other than Copilot, I haven't found a whole lot of difference. But this is just something I've not done.
Okay, yeah, might be worth trying, and you can go ahead and do that as well. So that said, that's basically all I have for slides, except for a couple links to some of the other things I was showing earlier. So I was thinking we can go actually into a real repo. We can create something from a template. We can do a couple build commands and whatnot, if you guys are curious of how all that works. So let's see. Let me start. Let me go to here. And I could just, I guess, delete all this in here. So I have, this is a real package that I've been working on. It's mostly stable in the way that I like it now. I nuked my virtual environment just so we can start from scratch and see how a build works, if that would be useful. And we can also like run some of the code quality tools, so you can like PyTest and see that it finds things. So I think.
Is anything you're doing VS Code specific?
No. No, I'm just basically using this here in case we want to like refer to some of the files and see stuff that gets created. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new virtual environment.
You're in WSL right now?
Yes. So I'm in WSL and I'm just using Python VNV. So if you're using a virtual environment cont or something else, of course that would be a little bit different. So I'm going to again do everything based on there. So sure. And then we'll activate it.
The name of the virtual environment folder is another thing where there's like 3 or 4 different. I see venv, .venv,
Yeah.
.pyv,
Yeah,
maybe
so
1 or 2 others.
that's actually a good point. So can you think of a reason why you'd use .venv instead of just venv?
That's what I use with the
the
dot. I didn't really. I think that's just what I saw a lot when I was doing it online. I know it would be hidden by default if you do
Right.
ls on Linux.
Right. So that's why a lot of people like to do that because depending on how building, structuring, posting, whatnot. So, I mean, it's pretty easy to just like ignore it, like in your paths,
Right.
like in your git ignore or in your toml. But yeah, I guess some people just like to do that because of the hidden feature. I think I see more of just like without the dot, but again, to each their own, and there's no right or wrong to that. So we can see we have a couple of things already here for, we have pip and we have setup tools. What you'll notice is that in this repo, I don't have any requirements.txt. So just as I guess polling the audience again, like what do people tend to use? Do you like to use like a requirements.txt? Do you put it in your setup config? I don't use no requirements.
For packages
Yeah.
that you. So I use for like most of my projects, and rarely, I think I've only done like one project where it was actually like installable. Like most of my projects are like web stuff where it's like you're not installing it. I've been using pip tools, which has like pip compile. So you do like the requirements.in, and then it just has basically all the top level dependencies, and then it like has you run pip compile, and it generates a requirements.txt that has like the top level dependencies and all of like their nested dependencies. But then it like, because if you don't do that and you just have, like a lot of tutorials say like pip freeze and then you pipe it to requirements.txt, but the problem with that is then you get all of your sub dependencies, so it gets kind of messy, I think.
Yeah, it's a huge list. It's kind of scary.
You're like, I didn't install that. Where's that coming from?
Yeah.
So when you run that compile command, where do those requirements actually come from?
The requirements.in file.
And do you just populate that? Like why
I just handcraft it with 10 or 11 care.
Yeah. So why have two? Why have an .inf and a requirements.txt?
In my mind, it's very similar to like nodes or npm's package and package lock.json. Where like I think the package just sort of has the top level dependencies, and then the package lock has like all of the dependencies, like including the nested ones. So you could get a reproducible environment if someone else installed, like down to the minor and patch versions of the nested dependencies.
Got it. Yeah, so a lack of a lock is one of the things that people complain about with like the current state of like Python packaging and whatnot. So anyway, yeah. So what's interesting here, like what other people are doing for that. So I do have a project, that toml file in here, but you can see that I don't have a setup config or setup dots .py. But I do have, I guess right here is a dependencies. And this is a Django package, so there's a couple of dependencies there, really only three. So if I do a pip install, I'll just go ahead and do it editable. And I guess I want to say one other thing here is like I have additional things that are not required for the package itself, but are required for like all of my code quality stuff. So basically my dev environment. So if I want to install all of the, oops, I keep on focusing on the wrong thing here. If I want to install all those, I can do like this. So anyone used to, are you guys looking at this like what the hell's going on? Or because you're used to like
so -e will install, so this
-e is editable mode. You don't have to use editable mode.
But that'll like install the project that you're into your virtual environment.
Yes. So editable mode. So this package that I'm working on, doing stuff with, we'll put that inside the local virtual environment. You can do it without editable mode if you want. But
so editable mode would be as you're making changes, you don't have to keep installing it. Gotcha. How does it track your changes? Like, does it actually copy the whole folder when you do that into your virtual environment folder? Or does it just like do a symlink or something?
I think it's like something equivalent to a symlink.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. So I'm going to run that, and what we'll see is it's going to go ahead and find all the things and install all the things.
I see the brackets most when like installing Celery, because you can do like the Redis or the RabbitMQ backends, or maybe there's some other options, like that optional bracket thing that you did.
Yeah. So you can name like all kinds of different stuff here. Like I just called dev because I guess that's kind of standard. But if you want to say a test and have like different requirements for your dev versus your test, or docs, or whatever. You can give any other name that you want for optional dependencies and just have those separated. So just installed all the things. If I do like a pip list now, we can see that I have much more. Let me see if it got build, because I will need that. Perfect. So that means all the things are installed there. So yeah, how about we do a build and we can see that. So I'm sure people are probably used to doing something like Python setup.py and then like sdist. Like I was doing this for like years and years and years, right? So since I don't have a setup py anymore, that doesn't work. So the new way to build is like this with this set of build tools, which as defined here. So
that build module is built into Python as of some Python 3 version.
It's not built in, you actually do have to install it.
Oh, gotcha.
So there is like a build package that allows you to build.
Oh.
As confusing as that might be. If you're using set tools, again, if you're using like Flit or Poetry or one of those, it's going to be a little bit different.
Gotcha.
So any guesses on what this will produce?
An egg.
An egg, all right.
I've seen those before.
You've seen eggs. And any other guesses?
That doesn't look like an egg. Where's the egg?
Yeah. So one thing that I do find interesting with building it this way is it is a little bit slower than just what I used to do. And if you caught it at the beginning, let's see if I can find. Is this actually creating its own isolated environment to do the build? So there's an extra step there. So I don't know, I found that was pretty cool. So it did make some things. So there is an egg. So we didn't get into.
I don't know how they work, but I know they're there.
Yeah. So we didn't really get into like eggs versus wheels versus like other types of things. But it can find the egg right here. So if you guys ever like looked at what an egg actually creates.
Tell me about the egg.
Python.
Yeah.
I don't really know much about it.
Yeah, so I guess that the main thing is eggs are not really like the most current things. It's wheels now. But again, well, they're more round. Yeah, they're more round. But yeah, again, that's going to be dependent on like your choice of build tools. So this is the egg. So you can see right here. In this case, my package is called Python host utils. We have some information here, which might be interesting. So this is all the metadata in this package info type thing. So this is like my license, other metadata down below, some documentation that gets rendered, all kinds of like interesting things in there. There's also a requires, which has all of my requirements in there as defined from the TOML file. There's a sources, which is basically a list of all the actual files that are included in this package. And there's a top level that shows where I guess the top level items are. In addition, oops, don't worry about that. In addition, there's also it created this dist. So this is something that will work with, if you do just like said tools sdist or bdist wheel or one of those commands, you get this as well. Obviously, you get the wheel.
Linux guys, interpret.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, and you get a tar wheel, which is actually an installable thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, technically, like
Keep archive retrieval or something. That's what it stands for. It's an old Unix command.
Yeah, it's just a zip, and you can like literally, or also like just unzip this as well, or I guess untar or untarable. So a wheel is basically just a zip for like all that type of information.
So if you unzip that, is that all your like source files and those egg files in there too, or like how do the egg files work with the tar files?
You fry your egg.
Yeah. So well, let me ask you this: have you ever like looked at a thing that's installed in your virtual environment?
Yes. Yeah.
And what do you see?
It's mostly like the source files. At least when I like control click to go look at something in Django, that's what it.
Right. Yeah. So you think you might.
I think it shows me some.
You might see like all these files, for example.
Right. Does it show you? I guess I could go look now. But does it include? Like where do those files get used? Like those 5 files.
So I don't know that the egg information gets used anymore at this point. 'Cause I do know
I
that.
love this term. Still adopting it.
Yeah, well, don't adopt it too much because it's an old term now.
Oh.
Yeah,
So we're still. Do you have to do wheel stuff separately?
not anymore.
Okay.
So if you were using like older setup tools where you use like the Python setup.py command,
Mhm.
you do like either build like an sdist or a bdist or a wheel. I guess I would say like this: if you are like posting something and like posting it on like a PyPy or another thing, the wheel is a thing that gets uploaded to PyPy so that other people can like pip install.
Okay.
And it already has all those files built in. Okay. So I noticed in your requirements.txt, it doesn't have the version numbers. Like when you do the freeze requirements.txt, it like gives you all the specific versions. Is that just so that for your package, it'll grab all the most up-to-date ones?
So yeah, that's a great question. I'm not 100% sure, but I bet it's because in my dependencies here, so I didn't pin it to specific versions.
I see. So it just grabs those how they are.
Well, let's test it. Let's build it again. So if I do like a pip list pipe ps, for example, and get my ps utils version, let's pin it to this, and we'll just like build it again. So if I do, how's it being wonky? And do another build. Let's see what we get.
All right, cool.
I read an article that was saying if you create your virtual environment without including pip, it's like instantaneous.
Really?
Yeah. But then you don't have pip, which is.
That's why you should use Poetry or Flit or one of these other things. Actually, in that first link I showed you, that guy's blog post, he was like kind of, I don't want to say champion, but it seems like he was favoring like PVM. There's a whole section on there on like why virtual environments aren't needed, which kind of goes against everything I understand, but maybe.
A year from now, it'll all be different.
Yeah. All right. So, okay, we want to look at, yeah, there you go.
Oh, awesome.
That's the reason.
All right, there we go.
So you pin your versions and you'll get some stuff.
All right.
Perfect.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So what did you say was the package that's doing this building?
Build.
That's what it's called?
It's literally called build.
Okay, gotcha.
Is that owned by the Python Packaging Authority? I don't know if owns the right, like managed.
Like approved by, I guess, would be maybe. Yes,
Okay.
as far as I'm aware.
So do you think on Streamlit's like on their side, do you think they're like building your project and hooking up to it and hosting it?
Yeah, so Streamlit's a little bit interesting. So remember when we were talking about, let me go back to here. Oops, not this button. When we were talking about like how you might want to structure it. So Streamlit's, as far as I'm aware, is not big on like having a source directory, because you have to have a main.py in the root, I think, or a path to it. So there's nothing built, as far as I'm aware, to like go to Streamlit, because it's literally, as far as I understand, running that one main file.
So in their documentation, it's kind of weird. They say that you have to have that main, and I did have that. And then when they show you the multi-page layout, they actually break that convention. And when you actually if you're hosting on Streamlit and you deploy a new app, you can actually specify what file you want to point at as the main one.
Huh.
So I have
Okay.
something named something like financial activity, and I had to actually make a new app because the other one was pointed at my main, and I refactored and the main went away and it was still building locally. So yeah, I just made a new app, pointed it at that new file, and it kind of just like treats that as the main. So you actually get away with that like main.
Gotcha. So you can have
Deal.
something under a source, under a package directory if you wanted it, like a little bit cleaner, different.
Yeah.
Sweet. Cool. I look forward to seeing some examples next month when you tell us all about Streamlit.
Yeah.
Me too.
Should I get it up on Meetup?
Yeah, let's talk. Well, we can chat after.
Yeah.
For sure.
Cool. So Yeah, so that's, I guess, some good examples there. If you're interested, we can run some code quality, or we can take a look at uh, maybe doing a templates.
Do
You guys seen that?
I have a question. Do you typically use like GitHub Actions to build and upload your packages to PyPI?
Perfect question. So right here under my GitHub Actions, are you guys familiar with like GitHub Actions? A little bit? Okay. So I actually have a PyPI right here that I have triggered off of tags. Oh, I forgot to talk about tags in the build process. Let me get back to that. So you can see right here that I'm doing this exact command that we're doing manually, and then I just used Twine to upload the PyPI.
Can you talk about Twine?
Yeah, Twine is basically a package that tries to make uploading PyPI easier.
Oh.
So instead of doing like a whole bunch of steps, you literally do this. So as you can see here, this created a dist folder, and Twine will, well, with this command, which is doing star, will upload everything to PyPI using these secrets that are in my GitHub secrets that are already set up there.
In the repo.
Yeah, yeah. So you can do like GitHub has like repo secrets or action secrets, whatever they're called. Yeah.
Did you see? I think it was in like 2 weeks ago. GitHub or no, PyPA announced they're adding support for OpenID Connect or OIDC. I'm not an expert on this, but it basically means you don't have to actually put credentials into your repo as secrets. You basically just tell PyPI in your account or somewhere, I haven't done it, you tell it like, hey, new package is going to be coming from this GitHub repo, and so it like, basically they just trust each other, and so like, I'm doing a horrible job explaining this, but basically it removes the need for credentials, so it's like, oh, my credentials got hacked, you don't have to go like roll them or whatever.
Sweet. Hey, any one less step, as long as it's trusted, that works for me.
Yeah. I haven't tried it again, but it seems interesting. There's other people who work here who know more about OIDC than I do.
Gotcha.
Yeah. That's cool though.
Great.
That's so do you can you scroll up again? You had it set on tags. So like
yeah.
when you push
Basically when
Interesting.
when I create or push a tag, it'll use that to trigger a build.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah, and I totally forgot about to talk about tags too, because another a big part of packaging in general is your versioning, and you could hard set version inside whatever configuration it is, whether it's set up that pie or whatnot, or YAML. So I do have this one line in here for using setup tools SCM, which is another add-on to setup tools, which will look at your source code environment. In this case, it's Git, and make the build. It'll basically guess what the next version should be. So in this case, the one we just built, as you can see in our dist folder, and in our output here is 0.0.4. So if I did like a git tag to see my tags, I've already done 1, 2, and 3, and it knows based on the available tags the next one should be 4. So that's what it's building for me automatically.
The build module did that.
If the setup tools SCM does that.
Oh, gotcha. That's interesting. We had a question online.
Oh, okay, we actually have online viewers. Awesome.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody online.
Double asks, what about the .idea directory for PyCharm, which I think is like JetBrains?
Yes. So when you're saying what about it, I'm assuming that you're asking should that be ignored. So like I probably literally have that in my git ignore. I'm a big PyCharm guy. I've been trying to force myself to be more VS Code just because it seems like I guess more stuff is using VS Code. And the free version doesn't let you do WSL on Windows. You have to actually buy a license, so that kind of sucks. Because of that, I've been trying to use VS Code. So I normally have like, basically all the IntelliJ or PyCharm type stuff ignored here. So if you don't want that included in certain things, you might need that in an include. But I guess one thing I should say, when you do your configuration for your packages, somewhere, it's in here somewhere, whether you're using whatever build tool you're using, like setup.cfg or whatnot, it usually that allows you to have like a root folder, and that's usually going to be your source if you have it structured like we were showing before. So typically your IntelliJ stuff or your PyCharm stuff or your VS Code or whatever it is not going to be under your source directory. It's going to be under your root directory. So when you do your build and tell it to build from source and everything under it, then that's where that's going to get from. So let me show you the manifest. So one thing, as I mentioned earlier, that I haven't been able to like get around is having a manifest file. And we can see here that I'm basically including everything under the source and excluding some of my other stuff, including my .githubs and my docs and my tests. Hopefully at some point in the future, this will all move to into the TOML itself. And if you look at the PyPI, I'm sorry, the PyPA documentation, they actually have some, I might not find the exact page for it, but they have a number of these things of how to tell stuff where to find. Like in setup config, you can give it this root or whatever root directory you want to build everything under. Like for example, like source. Instead of .py, it's like this, and in py project.toml, which they say is beta, which probably explains why it's not working the way I want it to quite yet. Because I did try to do exactly this and like not have a manifest file, but that wasn't quite working the way that I want. So hopefully that answers our online question of what about PyCharm stuff. I think they're probably asking about how to not include that, and that's just to give a source directory of where you want to build from.
Cool. I asked him if it answered it. We'll see.
Okay. Sweet.
I had a question. You were in your git ignore, and I saw a big code or a big comment block. If you scroll up.
Maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that like part of the default?
I think that's part of the default. That's definitely not something I would have done off the bat. So I'm assuming that came from GitHub.
Interesting. Okay. I was just curious.
Well, actually, that is a good question because I thought I usually override that for other stuff as well. But,
I also know you were hiding your version file.
Yes.
I'm not. Can you explain why again? I'm not sure I totally understand
I
that.
can. So when you use setup tools SEM, this has to reference a version somewhere. So you can tell this wherever you want. Like for some reason, I just put under source and under version. Might not even be the best place for that. But it's not something that you actually want to be checked in the source controller because that's going to change every time you do a build. So if you're curious of what that is basically it's just parsing that git tag in this case and giving some information that can be used by the build process to set that.
And that SCM tool is set. You had to install that specifically to get that functionality.
Yeah. So up at the top of the TOML file, we have this one right here, setup tools _SCM. That's what does that.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. Perfect. So it's almost 7. I know that's, I think we scheduled an hour. Like, I'm happy to go into more stuff if people are interested. Because I never talked about, I guess, templates or whatnot. But let's just pause here real quick and see what people want to do.
How do you submit a PyPy package or a pip package? Because I've tried before.
And do you have a PyPy account?
Yeah, I think so.
And how were you trying to submit it?
It was a while ago, but I couldn't figure out building the package. I was using setup tools.
Did you get this tarball under your dist?
No, I didn't even get that far.
Yeah, so if you didn't get that far, it is probably not like a valid thing to push to PyPy. Yeah, I would probably try to do that again. You might be missing some piece of config in your setup.cfg or your setup.py, or hopefully now neither, and in your TOML.
I have like one package on PyPI, and it took me a while to figure out how to get all the.
Yeah, I was trying to upload it to the Debian repository so you could do sudo apt install in the Arch repository, but I couldn't figure it
Wouldn't that be separate from like PyPI?
Well, I tried all three of them
Oh,
because there's a Python project.
Yeah, so I would definitely, hopefully some of this like made sense. It can help with that. If not, we can definitely share the links. I think the last thing I had on the slides was basically a link, page of links to like lots of references that I had here if you want to check out some of the other tools. But definitely maybe go to like the PyPA because they have instructions for basically all the main methods now. So whether it be config, setup.py, or toml. And it should literally just be as simple as that if you have their configurations set up correctly, just python-m build. Or if you're using not toml, python setup.py sdist.
I have setup.py. I have setup.py in my one thing.
Man, stuff is still all over the place. So this is one of my newest repos, the one that I've been showing, and I was trying to get it clean and only do this. Everything else I have has, a couple of them have a toml, a config, and a setup.py. I think my oldest one has a setup.py and has some of the config in like the source file ini because I saw somebody else did it that way. It's like, oh, I like the way these are, I relate their packages and figured these guys must know what they're doing. So I copied them and I was like, that's not the way to do it anymore. So yeah, I have stuff all over the place, and hopefully
toml only.
this is my first toml only.
Okay.
So I'm going to try to do that from now on. My last company I was working with had a combination of toml, setup.py, and setup.config, and so I think that's probably overkill now.
So this Django host utils is on PyPI.
Yeah.
And then hopefully eventually you can get away from the manifest.in as well.
Hopefully.
And it'll be just toml.
Yeah, in my opinion, less is more, and I like that root repository or that root folder very clean.
Yeah, coming from like software development versus web development, that's like the thing that disturbs me the most. Like all these files and formats just floating around in the project repository.
Yeah.
That gives me anxiety.
Sweet.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah,
Welcome.
thanks.
We should it'd be interesting to just take like a greenfield project, like the minimum, just like print hello world and what you need to do to get that on PyPI, because it's not trivial.
That actually not be a bad idea. I think hello world isn't the most exciting thing, but
Or well,
it would be your hello world.
hello, type in your name and it prints it.
Yes. So
No, that's a great idea.
yeah, again, definitely play with that a little bit. Use the PyPI test, and it should be as easy as this.
It looks like
those two methods.
there's I lost the tab. It looks like PyPA has a article on how to get a package on
really many these days.
PyPI.
And if you're using Poetry or Flit, they have their own built-in things that supposedly make it even easier. I mean, this seems pretty easy to me once you get all your configuration right, or the way that you want it. But I can't speak to some of the others, but I know things like Poetry have like a big following these days.
What's Flit all about?
It's just another like thing.
Yeah,
actually.
Cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
Yeah, I think I missed that slide. So I did have one on here about, and these are not by any means like the main things, but setup tools, Flit, Poetry, and probably like PDM or like some of the most popular build tool options. And some of these also have further things to like installations and distributions as well.
So Flit and Twine are trying to solve similar issues.
These all of them overlap to some degree,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's just like methodologies, the tabs or spaces, the Emacs or Vim. It's like you're wrong, I'm right, or whatever else. Like pick your camp, I guess.
Speaking of that, I gave Rough a try.
Yeah.
RUFF. Yeah. I haven't quite figured out. I don't know. We have this big project, and it sometimes chugs in VS Code, so I was trying to use rough to replace like flake8 and some other stuff. But I think it's Pylance that's actually causing the slowdown, which is like VS Code's Python language server. Or actually, I think Pywrite is the language server, and Pylance is the language server plus some secret sauce. Or well, it's open source, so it's not secret, but I don't know. There's so many tools.
Open source secret sauce.
The
Yeah.
open.
Pylance is why I moved away from VS Code actually.
Oh yeah.
I was just having so much trouble with like getting it to do the IntelliSense or like the autocomplete.
Oh really?
And yeah, like I'd get it working and then I'd leave it for a while and come back and I'd have to like set up the interpreter again, restart VS Code, and I don't know, it just became this thing. So I actually switched to PyCharm after that, and it's worked perfectly now.
Just works.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you do all your code in PyCharm?
I do like VS Code for like JavaScript and stuff. But yeah, I'm doing Python in PyCharm now.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I haven't tried PyCharm. Last time I used JetBrains was like Android Studio, I think,
Mm.
which I think is JetBrains.
I've seen it on his machine. Does that count?
Yeah.
It's
pretty. I mean, they're all pretty standardized. All the IDEs these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks nice.
It does. It's got a nice like layout and stuff, and yeah, all the tools you're familiar with.
Okay.
Do you want to say anything else before I end the stream?
Thanks everybody. Thanks Intellatech, and thanks Joe. Thanks team.
Thanks, internet people.
We'll see you next month for Streamlit.
Oh yeah, let the post